Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of That Sounds Fun. I'm your host, Annie F. Downs. I'm so happy to be here with you today. We have got a great show in store. And before we dive into today's conversation, I want to tell you about one of our incredible sponsors. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. I just saw my counselor last week. You guys know by now that she has been so helpful to me as I navigate my mental, emotional, and spiritual health. I've benefited so much from her help, and spoiler alert, y'all have benefited from it too. I think it's really important to prioritize time for therapy, even in the midst of busy seasons. I know you're being pulled in 100 different directions right now, but adding a counseling appointment to your schedule doesn't have to be another stressor. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and fit in your schedule. Your session can be done right from home, and you just fill out a brief questionnaire. Y'all know we love a quiz, and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist. Finding a therapist that is the right fit for you is so important, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge, so you're sure to be working with someone who is a good match. When you're stretched thin, it's easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you and never take a moment to figure out what you need. Therapy can give you the tools to find more steadiness in your life so you can keep supporting your people without leaving yourself behind. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/thatsoundsfun today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/thatsoundsfun. Today on the show is a good one, y'all. I get to talk with my friend Shane Claiborne. Shane is a speaker, an activist, a best-selling author. Y'all get this. He's worked with Mother Teresa in Calcutta, Mother Teresa, and he founded The Simple Way in Philadelphia. Shane is a champion for grace, which has led him to places like jail, yes, actual jail, as he advocates for the homeless, and to places like Iraq and Afghanistan to stand against war. Shane heads up Red Letter Christians, a movement of folks who are committed to living as if Jesus meant the things he said. His latest book, I've read a lot of his stuff. This is my favorite. It's called Rethinking Life, Embracing the Sacredness of Every Person. It released in February, and it explores the battle between life and death that goes as far back as the Garden of Eden. This moving and timely book creates a larger framework for thinking about God's love and our faith as we embrace a consistent ethic that values human life from womb to tomb. I think you're going to find this one really interesting. So here is my conversation with my friend, Shane Claiborne.
Hey y'all, staff boss Ashley here. Don't worry, nothing's wrong. We just gave Annie the afternoon off and then realized there was one more thing we wanted to say before we dive into this conversation. And so here I am. This conversation between Annie and Shane is important and thought-provoking, and also due to the nature of some of the topics that they discuss, things like gun violence, sexual abuse, abortion, murder. We just wanted to go ahead and give you a heads up about that up front so that if any of those topics are tender for you, you can proceed with the sensitivity that we always encourage each other to have with our own hearts, and that you can also make that decision now for any BFF ears who may be in close proximity.
Shane Claiborne, welcome to That Sounds Fun.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
You have got to know what a fan I am. I mean, for years, I've been watching you in the least creepy way lead in so many interesting places. So thank you for making time to do this.
I'm blushing over here. Yeah, it's so nice of you.
Well, okay, so tell me this. You grew up in East Tennessee. Is that where y'all still are?
I love East Tennessee. That is where I grew up. I came to school in Philadelphia, and I kind of stayed.
Yes.
I've been here for about 25 years in Philly, but I still get down there all the time. I'm a mama's boy. I love my mom. I love the East Tennessee. My people are buried in the Smoky Mountains up there. So,
yes.
Yep.
I love, I mean, even in Rethinking Life, your newest book, you talk about how different Philly is than East Tennessee, but also you bring up my girl, Dolly Parton, which I appreciate. Woo! I mean, like your grandparents lived around the corner from her?
Yes, Annie. And if I was in Tennessee, I have a little office up in Tennessee as well. And on my wall, I have my To Shane, Love, Dolly.
No.
Signed picture. So, literally our my great-grandparents, her family grew up on the same hillside. I remember my uncle saying, I remember when she used to play on the front porch, you know, and I still inherited a little piece of land, Annie, in the mountains there. And it says on the deed, Old Hag Holler. Oh. That's the name of the road. Great. So that's how country we are.
Oh, yeah. I love it. Okay, so much of what you write about and talk about is pro-life from start to finish, a pro-life belief system from birth to death, right? And
Yes.
so, but growing up, I mean, I grew up in Georgia and spent a lot of time, I mean, I use the word holler on a normal basis. So our upbringing, I was around guns my whole life. I was around young moms a lot in my life. And so kind of, will you talk me through how you go from growing up around that culture to living in such a different culture and having different belief systems than your family? I assume. Sorry, that's an assumption.
Well, honest to goodness, part of what gives me a lot of grace and patience to talk with folks who might see things a little differently or might be working through how they feel about some of these big issues. I have a lot of patience because I was passionately on the other side of many of them, like the death penalty and guns and different things. And I think, where we sit determines what we see, and my worldview was really shaped by that East Tennessee culture I grew up in. There's things I absolutely love about it, but there were, a lot of things that once I came to Philly, I kind of looked back and I started to have eyes to see, as Jesus said, like we had the Confederate flag on everything in my high school. I went to the Maryville High School Rebels. That's what we were, and so, we had it painted on our walls. We had the Confederate flag on our lunchroom trays. And so,
oh my gosh, on the lunchroom trays.
Yeah, I kid you not. Yeah.
And for our friends listening, you weren't in high school 50 years ago. Just because they don't see you, so they don't know that you're not 90. That was like in the last 25 years or something. You were in high school.
I won't tell you what high school reunion's coming up. Actually, it was back in the 1900s.
Yeah.
I grew up passionately saying that I was pro-life, but really the main lens through which I thought about that and defined that was on the issue of abortion.
Yeah.
And and I write about this. I still think that abortion matters, and I care deeply about it. But I think that other things matter too. So I don't want to shrink what it means to be pro-life. I want to expand that. And gun violence now is the number one cause of death of kids in Tennessee and kids around the country. And so that matters to me. I think every person that dies is made in the image of God, and whether that's the death penalty or gun violence or abortion or racism, like that matters to me. I think it matters to God. So, and a lot of my family are still gun owners. Like our family are still hunters. Katie, my wife, is from North Carolina, so we're very comfortable with guns. And there's entire groups now that we work with of gun owners concerned about gun violence, hunters against assault rifles. And some of my family are really would fit that category. They're gun owners that are concerned about gun violence.
Yeah, it feels like the loudest thing we hear and this is true, I mean, we should all just remember this every election cycle. The loudest thing we hear are the polar opposites, not the hunters against gun violence. Like, you don't hear from them. You don't hear the people who are trying to do these nuanced conversations that are inviting both a little bit of yes and versus all or nothing.
That's right. Yeah.
Why is that? Why is that who we hear the most?
Well, I think some of this is not about the gospel of the sweet Lord Jesus, but about partisan politics and some of the ways that you distinguish yourself from the other person or the other party, especially when you have a two-party system, is not by emphasizing the things that you might be able to work together on, but the really stark differences that you have and digging your heels in. And I think that's why we see a lot of uncompromising rhetoric and ideologies that kind of hijack the airwaves, and I think we could find some common sense ways to agree on gun laws, but I also think we could find some guardrails and some common sense boundaries on abortion, on so many things, So that's what I've been trying hard to work together on. And it's really clear to me that self-righteousness is toxic. Jesus kind of referred to the yeast of the Pharisees, as this kind of moral self-righteousness that's so damaging. And I think in our culture, I grew up with a conservative version of that was, about being sort of purity culture and stuff. But there's another version of that in a lot of justice circles that's sort of has the same theological policing and cancel culture, but it's just on the left instead of the right. But I still think it's still about moral righteousness and making other people kind of feel how terrible they are.
We have another podcast we do called Let's Read the Gospels, where I'm literally reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John every month. And
Hallelujah.
so it's awesome. And all I do is read and pray. We don't give any commentary. But I need you to know we're on our 5th cycle now of reading it. And the 3 of us that sit in the room laugh every time we get to that part about the yeast of the Pharisees, because the disciples all thought Jesus was talking about them forgetting to bring bread. And he was like, no, you guys, it's not about that you forgot bread. We love that part.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about Rethinking Life and some of your other writing is you do such deep Bible study. And in Annie's opinion, it makes it hard to argue a lot of the things you say because you bring the Bible in. And so well done you. But will you talk about the first thing that's labeled sin in the Bible was not Adam and Eve? Will you talk about that? I had never realized that my whole life.
Well, this is a recent revelation for me too. I mean, I've been to seminary and everything else, but I really, we think of the original sin as kind of the Garden of Eden, eating from the forbidden fruit, Adam and Eve and the fall of humanity. But the first time that the concept and the word sin is used in the Bible is not actually in the Garden of Eden, but it's what happens right outside of the Garden of Eden with the inaugural murder of Cain and Abel. And that's where you see, I guess, really the concrete implication, what happens with a fallen humanity, and it's violence. It's a brother, a man killing his own brother.
Yes.
And it also says that blood cries out to God from the ground.
Tell
so there's this
part.
Deep grieving of God,
Yes.
that this is a person, a child made in the image of God. And my Jewish friends actually have helped me understand this a little bit more deeply. And one of the things that they pointed out is that word for the blood is plural. So it is about Abel's blood, but it's also more than Abel. It's everybody's blood that we've shed. It continues to cry out to God. That's why it's in the plural. It's not just one person, but it's that blood that is stained the pages of history and the land that we live on right now, that blood cries out to God. And they also point out that the verb is in the present tense.
Yes, that's the part.
So,
that's the part.
Yeah, woo!
Jeez.
So, it's still crying out to God. And it's also Michael Brown's blood, everybody's blood that we've shed. So I think it's a powerful place to begin, in the book of Genesis. But then, what's interesting, I do love the Bible, Annie, and I think part of what we need to do is better theology, because there's a lot of bad theology out there.
Right.
And, one of the constructs for how we even think about justice was one of the earliest ways of thinking about it, even earlier than the Hebrew scriptures, the Bible itself, was this idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This idea that we're going to, real justice is doing the same harm back that was done to us. Mm-hmm. And so it was very specific, though. The law allowed for reciprocal harm. So exactly how the person had harmed you. If they poked out your right eye, you could poke out their right eye, but not their left eye. It had to be exactly the same done. And that's why it's so interesting that Jesus knows that, and from your reading of the Gospels, he points back to that and he says, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you this, Moses told you this, but I tell you this. And he's actually challenging that idea that we should mirror the harm. As my mama taught me, 2 wrongs don't make a right. And that's what Jesus is kind of saying, is it might be legal, but that doesn't make it right. And it might be how we've understood it, but there's an even better way, which we don't mirror the evil. We don't do violence. We don't rape people who rape. To show that rape is wrong. But that's why it's so important, even with the death penalty, with so many of the ways that we think about justice after 9/11, after whatever happens, is that we're going to do that back to them. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to free us from.
Yes.
So I love it. But I think you're exactly right. We got to dig deeper on some of these Bible scriptures, these scriptures that have been used, I think misused, to justify the very stuff that Jesus came to heal the world of.
Hey friends, just interrupting this conversation to share about one of our amazing partners, Nutrafol. We are always talking about fun ways to style our hair, but what about ways to keep it healthy? You guys, millions of Americans experience thinning hair. In fact, it's really normal. It's just not openly talked about, especially among women. If you are one of them, you are not alone. There is a solution you can trust to deliver results. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement. It's clinically shown to improve your hair growth, thickness, and visible scalp coverage. It supports healthy hair growth by targeting the 5 root causes of thinning: stress, yes; hormones, always a factor; environment, we live in one; nutrition, we're trying; and metabolism, yes, that too. Nutrafol addresses all of these through whole body health. I love that Nutrafol offers 3 different physician-created formulas that support women throughout all stages of life, including postpartum and menopause. So no matter what season you're in, they've got us covered. With the natural, drug-free, medical-grade ingredients, they're bringing us the most reliable results. In a clinical study, 86% of women reported improved hair growth after 6 months. And 3,000 plus top doctors and stylists recommended Nutrafol as an effective and high-quality solution for healthier hair. You can grow thicker, healthier hair and support our show by going to Nutrafol.com and entering the promo code That Sounds Fun to save $10 off your first month subscription. This offer is only available to U.S. customers for a limited time, plus free shipping on every order. So get $10 off at Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code That Sounds Fun. And as always, if you can't remember a link or a discount code, you can find those lists of our sponsors and links in the show notes below, as well as in the AFD Week in Review. And one more amazing partner to tell you about, Shopify. Y'all know that sound? That's right. It means that another one of you is out there shopping our online store at shop.anniefdowns.com, and that is powered by Shopify. Shopify simplifies selling online and in person so you can focus on successfully growing your business. What small business have you been dreaming about starting? That is what I would like to know. I'm so excited to shop the small businesses coming to the Here For You tour. I love seeing what you guys are up to and what you're making and selling. Whatever idea you have, don't let the technical logistics keep you from getting started. Shopify has what you need to help get your products in the hands of the right people. What I love about Shopify is that no matter how big you want to grow, they can empower you with confidence and the control to take your business to the next level. From their in-person point of sale system to an all-in-one e-commerce platform, Shopify covers every sales channel, y'all. It even lets you sell across social media marketplaces like TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. They give you complete control over your business and your brand without having to learn any new skills. Plus, thanks to 24/7 help and an extensive business course library, Shopify is there to support your success every step of the way. You don't have to worry about something going wrong and having no help. Now it's your turn to get serious about the passion project you want to get out into the world, and try Shopify today. So sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/soundsfun. All lowercase. So go to shopify.com/soundsfun to take your business to the next level today. Shopify.com/soundsfun. Okay, now back to our conversation with Shane. That sounds fun. So what made this the right time for you to write Rethinking Life? I mean, why, knowing that, I mean, this has been your trajectory. All of us who know you and know your name and know your work, this has been a central part of taking these stories in scripture and saying, this is how it translates to what we're doing today and how we are handling life and death and murder. And we don't have a lot of murder conversations on That Sounds Fun, Shane. So here we go. So why was this the right time to write Rethinking Life? I'm sure this book has lived in your heart for a long time.
Yeah, it has. And the last couple of books that I wrote were sort of more specifically about particular issues. And the reason I wrote them is because as much as we say that we're pro-life, I saw that when it comes to gun violence, Christians are actually not always the champions of life. In fact, we're, I think, often obstacles to some of the things that would save lives when it comes to some of our policies, and even just grieving the over 100 lives lost every day in our country to guns. But we own guns. Christians own guns at a higher rate than the general population. We're one of the biggest gun enthusiast groups in the world. So we're worshiping
Christians of all race?
Yes.
Is that like across races?
White evangelical Christians are the steady base of support.
Okay.
But even as you just zoom out a little bit, there's still a problem that we have is we're, kind of worshiping the Prince of Peace, the one who said, love your enemies, who loved his enemies so much he died for them. And we, it's hard to reconcile that. So I wanted to write about that. I wrote Beating Guns. And then I also, saw that the biggest supporters of the death penalty are Christians. And in fact, 90% of executions are happening in the Bible Belt, where Christians are most concentrated. And Tennessee is one of those, one of the many states that still executes people. We still have the electric chair in Tennessee.
I did not know that. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so the fact is that the death penalty wouldn't stand a chance if Christians decided to abolish it. And I think, when Jesus says so much of what Jesus is, his entire life is like, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. I have not come for the healthy, but for the sick. So much of the gospel is about that. Mercy triumphs over judgment. So for me, the death penalty and gun violence, they're not just political issues or social issues, but they are deeply spiritual and theological issues. So the reason I wanted to write this newest book is because I felt like we needed to zoom out a little bit from just the hot button issues. And we need to take a close look at the foundation for how we think about what it means to be for life, to be champions of life, and to think about that beyond just these kind of culture war issues of gun violence and the death penalty and abortion. Like, let's actually step back and say, what does it look like to be a champion for life without exceptions, from womb to tomb, from the cradle to the grave? Yeah.
For Rethinking Life, and kind of for your, I don't love this word, but it's the best one for it, for your platform, are you thinking about speaking to Christians the most? Is that your hope, is that Christians are listening to you the most, versus going into New York City or Atlanta or any big city and just standing on the sidewalk and going, no matter what you believe, here's what it looks like to be pro-life? Because when I read it, I thought, oh, he's talking to me. He's like talking to me as a Christian evangelical Annie.
Well, I try to write books in a way that are really open to anyone, and explain who John the Baptist is, but I'll also explain who Bono is. So they don't just think he's an Irish theologian.
Valentine and Constantine to me. So,
but I do think that for Christians, who think about the Bible as their primary authority for life and Jesus, like, I want to lean into that, right? Yeah. I don't want to have less Jesus. I want to have more Jesus. I want to even on the issue of life, I want to have a better conversation on abortion and what would really reduce the number of abortions. And, we've got some great examples of that. I kind of point to Mother Teresa as one of my inspirations for what it really looks like to be driven by love and concerned about life. And she was passionate about abortion, but she was also calling governors the night before an execution and saying, do what Jesus would have you do. I'm praying for you. You don't have to do this, And so that passion for life is contagious. I think, Mother Teresa is one of those. Dr. Martin Luther King was really passionate about so many of these issues. And even as a gun owner himself, there was a point where he just said, we're not going to win the fight to peace using the weapons of violence. And he gave up his gun and really decided to choose love. And he said, love doesn't kill.
And then hatred he dies by gun violence.
Right. Unbelievable. So, yeah.
Yeah. Can you help me understand? I'm pretty good as a person at seeing different points of view. My mother might even tell you I'm a little too good at seeing different points of view for a lot of things. Can you help me understand? There are a lot of our friends listening who are pro-gun, anti-abortion. And there are a lot of our friends listening who are pro-abortion, anti-gun. And they all would claim Christ, which is great because that means we'll all spend forever together. How do we end up with that dichotomy? Do you see that dichotomy too, or am I just seeing something rare.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that first of all, when we have a bigger framework for every person is precious, made in the image of God, like when that's kind of our operating framework, or what I keep coming back to in Rethinking Life is this question: what does love require of us?
Yes.
What does love require of us when we're talking about abortion, but we're talking about a 13-year-old girl that was, violated and raped? What does love look like? And these are hard questions. That's why I think we need a lot of grace, and we need to talk about these. We're really good at having opinions about people we don't know, or about issues detached from the real people behind them. And that's part of the problem. So I start by, let's start with this conviction of the preciousness of life and fueled by love, because a lot of our other conversations can be fueled by fear. But then this is where I would say, Annie, like when it comes to like policies, sometimes Christians are like, whoa, we don't want to get political, but we're inconsistent on that, because you want to get political on, abortion, but not on gun violence or whatever. And there's folks that'll say, well, laws, they won't change anything on guns. If you want to get a gun, if you want to kill someone, you'll figure out a way to do it. But on abortion, they do believe that laws will change. So I want to be reasonable and say laws don't change everything, but laws should make it harder to take life. Yes. And Martin Luther King had a great line. He said, a law cannot make you love me, but it can make it harder for you to kill me.
Wow.
So I think we
Why
need
do
that
people
framework.
not quote that line more?
Come on, I know, right?
Like, for every Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and we see all those people who make graphics. Why have I not seen that one?
Annie, come on, I'm telling you. And he knew that like no law can change a racist or violent heart, but we can make it harder for people to kill. And every country in the world has a heart problem, has a sin problem, has the human problem of folks that want to do violence and harm, and they will figure out a way. But what we are unique in America is allowing sinful people access to weapons that can do unimaginable harm, like the AR-15. And this is interesting because I love when you say, what do people believe? Anytime I have an opportunity to talk with someone who might see things a little differently, I want to do it, And the fact is, I can even talk about the Second Amendment. I put the Sermon on the Mount a little above the Constitution, a lot above. But James Madison that wrote, this is the father of the Constitution. He said that liberty can be endangered by the abuse of power, but liberty can also be endangered by the abuse of liberty. One person's unregulated access to whatever guns they want, as many as they want, can begin to infringe on someone else's right to live. And they knew that. That's why they wrote well-regulated in the sucker, So I want to talk about it. That's why, with Russell Moore, he had a great show, Dr. Moore had a great show where he said, tell me where I'm wrong. That was the name of his podcast, right? Yeah. And I did it on the death penalty. And we talked about Romans 13. We talked about, all these different, because I think that's the conversations we need, right?
People are so afraid of that, Shane. People are, I can feel, one of the things we've been talking about on the show is what do we do when our stomach hurts? When we hear something on my podcast or in a book that we read, what do we do when our stomach hurts? But to me, the more we get to have them, the more your stomach settles, because it isn't the only time you've ever talked about gun laws and your faith, with people who may not agree with you. And as you know, I had already started reading your book before the shooting at Covenant, but that is my closest kids in my life were in that building. And we lost people that we know, and that had never happened to me before.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. And so, the conversation changed for me when it became up close. But that was true with every hot button topic in Christianity. The conversation changes when you love someone that is involved with it, whether it's sexual orientation or guns or abortion. If you love someone who is directly affected by that, it opens your heart, I think. Is that true?
Yeah. I hope so. And I think, it seems to be true to me. The more that we know people, the more complicated some of these issues get. I even write, in this book that I didn't know that my mom had an abortion because she didn't have a way or didn't feel the freedom to talk about that. I mean, everything that she had experienced had caused her just to bury that, you know? And my wife, shares her story in this new book. And, 1 in 4 women have been impacted by abortion. And yet we talk about this thing as just like, like we're holding signs and bumper stickers putting them on our car, like this doesn't affect real people. So I think it's similar with guns. When that gets closer to us, we can't wait on that, though. We can't wait enough Sandy Hooks or enough Columbines or enough Covenant schools that everybody in this country is impacted. But that's where you go. Let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about guns that shoot 100 rounds a minute. Very different from the guns when the Second Amendment was written. Shouldn't there be a limit on? I mean, we don't have grenades on the streets, right? So why do we allow weapons of war? And there's even,
this is a dumb question. Is there laws against grenades?
Yeah, there's laws. And there's laws. Get this, Annie. In Philadelphia, this is different in Tennessee, I know, but in Philadelphia, it was deemed that fireworks are dangerous. So you cannot have fireworks, the big, like M80s and, all the big fireworks. You can't have those in Philly because they're dangerous. And yet you can have an AR-15.
Right. If you can't have grenades, why can you have AR-15s? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I am noticing that no one's ever thrown grenades. We're not seeing stories of grenades. Lord, Shane.
I mean, this is how I like to think about it, though, Andy, too, is like cars, right? Cars are not designed to kill, but we know that they can be deadly. So think of all of the things that we've done just to try to keep people safe, right?
Yeah.
You got to show that you can drive a car before you can get a license. You have to pass a test. If you abuse your right to drive a car, you lose your license, right? And there are consequences if you drink and drive, if you do things that are irresponsible, if you drive recklessly. Right? Like we have speed limits, we have technology, airbags, like seatbelt laws, like all of these things that have have evolved with our technology. And yet guns, we have the capacity to do some of that. That's why I don't think it's just a policy thing.
Yeah.
We have technology, smart guns, fingerprint technology. They don't save every life, but they can sure save some. Yeah. And I think all of us should have every gear we got going, what could we do that might save some lives, and that's where in this recent news poll, 90% of gun owners want to see some regulations, right?
Yes.
Like a limit to the capacity. We know that like guns, that folks that are 16 to 20 years old are responsible for a disproportionate amount of the gun violence. Like you can't rent a car, you can't buy a beer. Maybe you shouldn't be able to own an AR-15, those things, like just reasonable gun laws. So that's what, and I think, let's try to find some common ground on each of these things, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, common ground feels like the thing that feels hardest to find, but what I long for. I'm just like, no, can we all kind of meet here and have this conversation? One of the things I love that you did in the book, speaking of common ground, and because you said it earlier, and I just want to reemphasize to myself and our friends listening, like it actually gets harder the more you search for common ground, and it gets more complicated the more you try to hear other people's perspectives. So we acknowledge that. We acknowledge that it is harder than just living in your community and agreeing with your community and not hearing anybody else. One of the people you write about so well in the book is Constantine, and how Constantine shifted Christianity, but how complicated he was. And then, will you talk a little bit about Constantine and how complicated and what he did for our faith, though?
Yeah, so Constantine is one of those folks that you almost feel awkward talking about it, as a Christian, because some people see him as the real monumental, like kind of iconic figure, the first Christian emperor that, made Christianity the dominant religion. But what I found as I dug deeper on it is that he is very complicated. And just to show that a little bit is like, here's Constantine, who is leaning into Christianity, who's trying to empower this sort of marginalized Christian movement that's beginning to be the dominant religion of the empire.
Yes.
So he has a Council of Nicaea where he brings all these bishops together. They draft the Nicene Creed, one of the most iconic documents in the Christian faith. And then a year or so later, Constantine kills his own family. I mean, the brothers still got this violence, and he's also got this conflict because he made one form of execution illegal. He said it's an offense to Christ to crucify people.
Yeah, he's the reason crucifixion went away. I didn't know that.
We're done crucifying people. Unfortunately, he wasn't done with the death penalty, just with crucifixion. So he kept killing people. I mean, he's not the bloodiest of all the emperors, but this is where it becomes like so problematic because he is trying to embrace the Christian faith, right?
Yeah,
and it's not just, I think what some people get wrong is they think it was just about numbers. And it was not just about numbers of Christians versus like non-Christians, but it was about proximity to power. Right.
Yeah.
And the ability to actually, the power shift, the kind of tipping point where Christians had the power to persecute other people, which they didn't have to that point.
Yes.
And then they began to mirror the very evil that was done to them, to destroy other, pagan buildings, to like burn books, that were considered holy books in other faiths, to like literally slaughter and kill people and like exchange the love and the cross of Jesus for the sword of Constantine. So I think it's a terribly complicated, but also just a terrible moment for Christianity as we sort of lose our way. You lose this kind of passion for nonviolence that had marked Christianity for at least 300 years, So, yeah.
And he gave us the Sabbath and made churches tax exempt. It's just bizarre. It is just bizarre that he set the calendar so that we worshiped on Sundays. And I think the reason I love that you wrote about him and what I learned from him is there's just this like, dear all of us, from the beginning, this has been complicated. And here's the good news. Our friends listening can go and do their own research and keep reading and keep learning and take this with them. And I think that's beautiful. That sounds fun. Hey friends, just interrupting this conversation one more time to share about another amazing partner, KiwiCo. Y'all know I love KiwiCo. KiwiCo is defining the future of play by making it engaging, enriching, and seriously fun. They create super cool hands-on projects designed to create a lifelong love for learning among kids and Annie's. Each month, KiwiCo delivers crates packed with fun and sparks creativity with kid-friendly topics and activities. From engineering robots to learning about the science of cooking, there's interesting topics for every kid and real hands-on skills to explore. The most recent box we just got has everything kids need to make their own wooden ukulele. Y'all, it is so cute. KiwiCo thinks of everything. All the supplies are included and the instructions are simple to follow. So the kids will feel so proud of themselves when they are done making it, and it actually works. KiwiCo has subscription lines for infants and preschoolers up to teens and beyond. Plus, KiwiCo projects are designed by a team of educators, makers, engineers, and rocket scientists who brainstorm hundreds of ideas to create the most exciting, age-appropriate, and educational projects. These are real engineering, science, and art projects with high-quality materials. The day the KiwiCo box arrives will be your kid's favorite day of the month. Redefine learning with play and explore hands-on projects that build creative confidence and problem-solving skills with KiwiCo. So get 50% off your first month plus free shipping on any crate line at kiwico.com/thatsoundsfun. That's 50% off your first month at kiwico.com/thatsoundsfun. And I have one last amazing partner to share with you, Thrive Cosmetics. Guys, scrolling through Instagram and seeing ads for Thrive Cosmetics really got me. But they did not steer me wrong. Thrive Cosmetics products are certified 100% vegan and cruelty-free and made with clean, skin-loving ingredients. Yes and amen. Okay, my favorite mascara is their Liquid Lash Extension Mascara. And with 25,000 five-star reviews, I would say a ton of you agree. It's so good that it looks like you have lash extensions, y'all. Their mascara uses a proprietary tubing formula, which means that it wraps around each lash as you apply it to dramatically lengthen and define your lashes from root to tip, and I will take it. It also lasts all day without clumping or smudging or flaking, and you know we need that. Nourishing ingredients support longer, stronger, and healthier looking lashes over time. Plus, when it's time to take your makeup off, y'all, it is so easy. It is crazy easy. The mascara slides right off with warm water and a washcloth. No soap required. It is the best-selling product from Thrive Cosmetics. I definitely know why. Thrive is helping us stock up our makeup bags with incredible, clean, skin-loving products that make us feel like $1 million while also helping us help others. Cause is in the name for a reason. As part of their mission, every purchase supports organizations that help communities thrive, with partners that help people emerging from homelessness, surviving domestic abuse, and recovering from cancer, just to name a few. You have to try Thrive Cosmetics to see for yourself. Right now, you can get an exclusive 20% off your first order when you visit thrivecosmetics.com/TSF. That's Thrive Cosmetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/TSF for 20% off your first order. And now back to finish up our conversation with Shane.
That sounds fun.
So when I'm thinking about our friends listening who are parenting, like y'all are parenting, you and Katie, I mean, how do we help kids understand pro-life from womb to tomb? How do we help them understand what that looks like and teach that even now?
One of the things that I suggest is that because history has been particular, history has not been colorblind, right? It's been very particular that some lives matter more than others. That's why it's really important to tell the truth about that history, and also to realize that even things like, for instance, I think the response to the Black Lives Matter movement was all lives matter. And you go, I can affirm that, but I also, if I can't affirm Black Lives Matter, there's something a little off there, right? Because part of that saying, we could say if you were in Israel, it might be saying Palestinian lives matter. Yeah. When Jewish folks are under attack, it's saying Jewish lives matter, right? Disabled lives matter, LGBTQ lives matter. Every person's made in the image of God. And if we can't affirm that with unapologetically in our soul, then we really don't believe all lives matter. And, the scripture that I look to, I heard my friend Alexia Salvatierra talk about this Corinthians verse where it's very familiar to me, talking about, we're all one body with many parts. But then there's a part of that scripture that says the parts of the body that have been harmed or shamed are given special honor. So the parts of the body that have been dishonored are given special honor. And she calls it God's affirmative action.
Wow, yeah.
God's affirming what we have not affirmed historically. So to say Black Lives Matter doesn't mean white lives don't matter. It doesn't mean Black Lives Matter more. It's just saying we need to be able to say that, because from the Dred Scott case to the 3-5 compromise to even what's happening now in our country, we are very good at saying white lives matter, and we need to be able to say that Black lives matter. Black folks are made in the image of God. They matter to God, and anytime their life is squashed, it's crushed, it's just as tragic, to us. And Michael Shea, the comedian, I quoted him on it. He said, if your wife comes up to you and says, "Baby, do you love me?" you don't say back, "Honey, I love everyone."
Right.
On Mother's Day, we're not just celebrating anybody's mother. We're celebrating our mama too. So I think there's a part of this that folks are crying out in the streets saying, do we matter? And we've got to be able to tell the truth about that history and believe that the truth will set us free. And we believe that in the church, that, that confession is a part of repentance. It's a part of healing our hearts, is being able to say, we've done some sinful things. And it doesn't help just to kind of try to move on from that without recognizing it. As Dr. King says, our history of race is like a infected, festering wound. And we're not going to get better just by kind of bandaging. We've got to really dig into it and say, we got to heal some of these wounds. And that might require some repairs, some doing some hard stuff because of what our history has held, true. So I think that's why, for me, this is so important to talk about, because we're easy at, our kind of cliche little sound bites. But if we really want to talk about healing and unity, what real unity is going to look like and what it's going to take for us to get there, then we got to have some hard conversations.
Yeah, I mean, what does love require of us? Even post-covenant school shooting here, I have asked myself, as I've been reading your book, I've asked myself, okay, so what does love require of me in this? And so I guess my question for you, I'm not married yet, I don't have kids, so it's just me. I'm not a gun owner. What's my next move? How do I be a part of what love requires of me? What does love require of me?
Well, isn't it interesting that we don't just have to speculate on what love is? We also know what love looks like. Scripture tells us love is kind. It doesn't envy. It doesn't boast. It's patient. It keeps no record of wrong. So I think that love we should be asking every politician and every pastor and every, like every person to say, let's recommit ourselves to that love. That's not just a verse to read at your wedding, like that's what we often use that love passage for. But let's say, I'm going to breathe that in every day. I'm going to pray that I would be driven by love. And we also know that love and fear are combating forces, right? They're like opposing magnets. And when scripture says perfect love casteth out fear, I think it's naming the fact that we've got to choose between love and fear. And one of the questions I think we can be asking is, what would it look like if love was the compelling force behind how we're thinking about immigration, for instance, right? Nobody just saying we don't need any order to things, or we just need wide open borders. I think people are saying we want a path to citizenship. We want folks that are escaping things that we can't even imagine to be shown hospitality, because we know when we welcome the stranger, we're welcoming Jesus. Come on.
Right.
I know we're not supposed to preach, Annie, but when we're welcoming foreigners, we're entertaining angels unawares. I mean, this is holy stuff. And this is not partisan. Welcoming immigrants isn't a Republican thing or a Democrat thing. It should be a Jesus thing. It should be anybody that's trying to love our neighbor. We're asking different questions. There's a different framework. We're not driven by fear. And a lot of our policies right now, whether it's immigration or guns or whatever it is, they're really driven more by fear than by love. So I think that's the real question. And our fears are unreasonable too. I quote this study from the Cato Institute that tells you all of the things that are more likely to kill you. In this case, they were showing all the things more likely to kill you than an immigrant or a refugee, and a cow is on that list. Lightning, roller coasters, falling down the stairs. One of them is a vending machine falling on you is more so our fears are shaped by some of this media and stuff that we're doing, not by reality. So I think, let's make a decision to choose love, not fear.
It feels more complicated than it should, because it does, because people land on a lot of sides of this. Rethinking Life was such a good read for me, Shane, because I was like, man, there are parts of this I have never thought about, and I want to. Not only do I need to, but I want to. I want to be thinking and get up close to some of these stories that I'm not up close to.
That means so much. I mean, I couldn't think of a better thing so that's exactly why I wrote this, and it's why I tell stories, because the stories have changed me. It's not like I don't know too many people that change their mind because they lost an argument, or they they get argued into thinking radically different. But I know a whole lot of people that something happens in their heart, and their head kind of moves with their heart, and they begin to then look at the theology that's got holes in it and all that stuff. And that happened to me on the death penalty. It's visiting guys at Unit 2 on Tennessee's death row. My mom's been, my wife have been. I got stuff all over my desk that they've made me. I've seen the stories of men that I think are innocent that are still on death row. Some of them are free now because they've been able to prove they're innocent. There's other folks that I've known on Tennessee's death row that I know they're guilty. They've told me what they did, and they're trying to heal the harm. And I see what Jesus has done in their life over the years, and that has changed me. That's why, to me, these are not just unrelated issues, but I think violence is the problem, not the solution. And it's people not just I haven't known someone really in my close family that's been killed, but it's people like Sharon Risher and Suzanne Bossler that their family members were killed. And yet they walked away asking that question, what does love look like? Even a love that holds out hope that someone's more than the worst thing that they've ever done. And, Reverend Risher, her mom and family were killed by Dylan Roof in the middle of church, middle Wednesday night Bible study. And she said, the more I thought about Jesus and the gospel, I knew that forgiveness was the only way forward. And she talks about how hard that was. It's not cheap forgiveness.
That's right.
And she says it's not so that Dylan Roof could sleep at night. It's so that I could sleep at night, so that hatred and resentment didn't poison my own soul, right? And I mean, that's the gospel, right? That's the gospel that says it takes faith to believe that God's love is bigger than Dylan Roof's hatred, that Jesus has the power to change even someone's heart who's done such horrific horror as Dylan Roof, or catch this, right? Saul of Tarsus, or David, or Moses who killed someone, right?
Yeah.
Like, to believe that no one is beyond redemption. That's really, to me, is at the very heart of the gospel, and it fuels my passion to try to create alternatives to the death penalty.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever thought about this till you're saying it, but I think what you're saying is the death penalty says you cannot be redeemed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what Dr. King said. It's society's final assertion that we will not forgive. Yeah. And I don't believe that forgiveness means that there isn't justice or that murder doesn't have consequences. I think Dylan Roof is eminently dangerous.
Yes.
And people need to be protected from him. But I believe we can do that without killing him. And I believe that the worst thing he does doesn't have to be the end of the story. Yeah. But And there's days where I might not feel that. And I'm going to say, Lord, help my unbelief.
That's it,
but
right.
That, Pope Francis has, said that it's a contradiction of the gospel. It was Mother Teresa was so passionate on this because she believed we're all more than the worst thing we've done. And, I think of the Methodist church that I grew up in. They said they've got a powerful statement on the death penalty. And they say that it denies the power of Jesus to redeem and restore and transform every person.
Wow.
So, so I think we can have conversations about what real justice looks like, what it looks like to heal the wounds of violence without just creating more wounds and mirroring the violence that hurt us. Yeah.
Yeah. When we're sitting around a dinner table with people who are of age to have this conversation, what a great, let's sit and talk about what it looks like to be pro-life from start to finish. And I think that, my friends and I have recently talking about what we think about cremation. Like, it's just kind of been this conversation we've been having about what we think about cremation and the gospel, and what about our bodies and where should our bodies be. And so I'm thinking, man, I want to have this conversation with my friends around the table too, and see what we all think. Nobody has to change my mind or me change their minds. I just want to see what everybody's thinking.
Yeah, and I want to say to anybody, listening to this, that these are new thoughts. I would say that it's a gift that we're even able to listen and talk to each other, because you just don't learn much from talking to people who say amen to everything that you say and don't stretch you. The things that I've learned have come from folks that ask good questions. And these are complicated things. And we've always got to have room for someone to change their mind. I changed my mind, right? I was writing our governor in Pennsylvania changed his mind on the death penalty, and now he's hoping to close the door on it, right? So people change. And I love that scripture that we're working out our salvation with fear and trembling.
Fear and trembling, Shane. That's
and Andy, I think it was Texas where I was, and this guy came up to me. He said, I got to tell you, man, I'm a redneck. He said, I'm a gun-toting, pickup truck driving, whiskey drinking redneck. And he said, but I've been reading your books and they've challenged me. And he said, I wanted to ask you if you could pray for me. And he said, because I consider myself a recovering redneck. And I think that we got to have room at the table for folks. And if our self-righteousness gets the best of us, where, we can't make room for someone else to change. Think of it. I don't know about you, Annie, but if I met my own self 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we would have had some hard words, we're different, right? So
that's the problem with writing books.
Changing.
That's our problem. Is we write books and people can read them 15 years later. And I say this a lot, Shane, when, at the beginning of every year, we do a State of the Union for the podcast. And I always say, you're not going to agree with all the guests. I'm not going to agree with all the guests, and you're not always going to agree with me, because I don't always agree with me when I go back and listen. So that's part of what we get to do is evolve as humans and learn and grow and think. I don't want to be in a faith that doesn't let me think.
That's it. That's so good. I had I think it was the 10th anniversary of my first book, The Irresistible Revolution.
Oh man, if people haven't read Irresistible Revolution, it's very good.
Well, that's real sweet. I wasn't saying it to promote it, but that's kind of you. But somebody else had this idea on the 10th anniversary. He said, I'm sure there's things that you see differently. So why don't you go through and write scrap notes in the margins? So that's what we did. I did a new edition that has all these notes in the sides.
Brilliant.
It's I'll set it like that, but and there's this whole thing. Now I'm married. And I said, people always ask, but what about if someone breaks in and is about to rape your wife? I was like, let me just let her answer that question.
I've got one of those now. I've got a wife now. So yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Oh, Shane, thanks for making time to do this. Thank you for helping us think about
it's
things.
so
I'm
good.
so grateful. I really am. Okay, last question we always ask. Because
Yep.
this show is called That Sounds Fun, Shane Claiborne, tell me what y'all do for fun.
Okay, two things. First, is we have been doing this blacksmithing, right? So my wife and I are aspiring blacksmiths and metal crafters. So we take the guns that are donated, many of them are assault rifles, and and we transform them. So this is what we've been making. Shovels. I know people are listening, but sometimes I hold up one of these shovels and I say, "This is what a gun looks like when it gets born again."
Yeah. So y'all are taking actual guns and turning them into farm. I mean, that is a Bible verse, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Beating swords into plows. So we're doing it. And but I'll tell you this too. So that brings me joy.
That's cool.
I love the circus, Annie. I love the circus. So
no one has ever said that.
Yeah. And so Katie and I are both we're jugglers, unicyclers. You ready for this? Fire breathers.
No.
So I'll bring it. I got to get outside next time, but we'll do one. I do a little fire breathing for you. I think the world needs more circus. I think that's my joy.
You're a juggler?
Yeah. Oh, let me see what I got. Yeah, I'll have to do that next time, Annie. But yeah.
Oh, next time, please plan to juggle for us.
What
a great answer.
I went to circus school, so I think that we need that, right? The world needs a little bit more juggling, circus, whatnot. So I'll bring my machetes and I'll juggle them for you.
Very good.
Time.
Oh, you're amazing. Shane, thank you again. Thanks for your work. Thanks for helping our stomachs hurt a little bit and think about some things, and that is okay. I'm grateful for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Annie.
Oh, friends, isn't he brilliant? It's just so much to think about. What does it look like for us to be pro-life from womb to tomb? What does it look like for us to embrace that ethic? And what would love have us do? I mean, I just think it is so good for us to keep talking about and thinking about. And we don't have to agree on everything, but we certainly get to chat together about it. And I'm grateful for how y'all do that. It is really special the way we talk through all this together. So I'm grateful for y'all. Your responses online are always so beautiful and kind and thoughtful. And so I'm looking forward to seeing all your thoughts from today. Hey, grab a copy of Rethinking Life and make sure you're following Shane on social media. Thank him for being on the show today. And y'all, we leave for tour in 3 weeks. I have no chill. I am so excited to hit the road to see you guys. So if you've been holding out on getting tickets, now is the time. The Here For You tour is almost here. It is going to be a blast. Carlos and I cannot wait to see you. And listen, we're doing a bunch of nights, 3 different weekends where we are talking all about community and how we are here for each other. And what does it look like to really do that in our lives and our families and our friend groups and our churches, for marrieds, for singles. I mean, it is going to be a really cool night around community. So I hope you'll join us and be a part of that with us. You are our community, so we are here for you. You are here for each other. The tour is sponsored by our friends at Africa New Life, and you can head to hereforyoutour.com to grab your tickets. Okay, so we heard what sounds fun to Shane. I liked it. Now we get to hear what sounds fun to one of our friends who is listening just like you. All right, Annie, because the show is called That Sounds Fun, tell me what sounds fun to you.
My name is Annie. I'm from Sacramento, California. And what sounds fun to me is hanging out with my best friends in our college town, going hiking, going to the beach, and eating at all of our favorite places.
Oh, tell me where you went to college.
Cal Poly San Luis Obispo.
Okay, so where is that compared to where you live now?
It's about 5 hours away, central coast of California.
Okay, so it's between you and LA.
Correct. It's about 3 hours north of LA.
Okay, California is so big. We forget all the time.
It's huge.
Yeah. That driving up and down is not possible, but for a normal person in a day.
No.
Yeah. Very good.
No, it's a whole day.
First meal y'all are going to have, what's your spot?
Firestone grilled tri-tip sandwiches.
My girl. I'm very interested in this.
Yes.
Well done. Good answer. I hope y'all get to do that really soon. If you need anything else from me, I'm embarrassingly easy to find. Annie F. Downs on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the places you may need me. That is how you can find me. And don't forget, you can find and follow That Sounds Fun Podcast on Instagram at That Sounds Fun Podcast. I think that's it for me today, friends. Go out or stay home and do something that sounds fun to you, and I will do the same. Today, what sounds fun to me is I get to go try on some of my clothes for the Here For You tour, you guys. New duds. There are new duds coming for you at the Here For You tour. I cannot wait. Y'all have a great week. We will see you back here on Thursday with, y'all, one of my favorites. Y'all are not ready. Kim Gravel is on Thursday. Y'all are going to love her if you don't know her yet. Okay, so we'll see you back here on Thursday. Y'all have a great week.